The past always collects its debt, no matter how much money you have. That's what Michael Harrison's grandmother always said. He never believed it, until the day a little girl with eyes identical to his appeared at the door of his mansion. Act 1. Introduction. The June sun was rising over Boston when Michael opened his eyes. 42 years old, owner of Harrison Enterprises, one of the largest construction companies on the American East Coast. The mansion in Beacon Hill, valued at $12 million, was just one of the symbols of the success he had so eagerly pursued. He stretched his arm across the Egyptian cotton sheets, finding only the empty space where Vanessa used to sleep. 3 months since the divorce was finalized, Vanessa had left with half his fortune and left behind the feeling that perhaps money couldn't buy everything. The digital clock showed 6:30 in the morning, time to start another day of empty achievements. The routine was impeccable. 30 minutes on the treadmill, green juice prepared by his personal chef, shower at the exact temperature of 38 degrees. Michael adjusted his Italian silk tie in front of the mirror. He faced his own dark circles, silent witnesses to sleepless nights. Emerald green eyes, the only inheritance from his Portuguese grandmother, Maria. Meeting with investors at 9, lunch with the mayor at noon, interview for Forbes at 3 o'clock, recited Caroline, his executive assistant, as he descended the marble stairs. Cancel lunch with the mayor. Say I had a family emergency, Michael responded automatically, adjusting the Swiss watch on his wrist. Caroline looked up from her tablet, surprised. Family, sir? Any problem with your parents in Florida? A dry laugh escaped Michael's lips. Just an expression, Caroline. You know that family isn't exactly my priority. The driver was already waiting with the Mercedes door open. The day would be like all others. Negotiations, contracts, millions moved with a simple nod of the head. Michael Harrison had built an empire by sacrificing personal relationships on the altar of success. His last serious relationship, before Vanessa, had been with Diana, a literature professor he had met during the construction of a business center in Chicago, 7 years ago. Diana Alves, the name he avoided pronouncing even in his thoughts. The woman who had made him question his choices, who spoke about building something beyond buildings. The woman who had disappeared after 3 months of an intense romance, leaving only a note. Some men were not made to share their hearts. The morning traffic in Boston flowed with customary predictability. Michael checked emails on his smartphone while the car glided through the historic streets of the city. 2 new projects approved, a purchase offer for land downtown, and a reminder about next week's charity gala. Mr. Harrison, we've arrived, announced the driver, parking in front of the glass and steel building that housed the headquarters of Harrison Enterprises. The morning went as planned. Meetings, negotiations, decisions that would affect the lives of hundreds of employees. Michael signed documents with the ease of someone who no longer questions their own power. It was during the interval between meetings that his cell phone vibrated with a call from the mansion's security guard. Mr. Harrison, sorry to bother you, but there's a situation here at the house that requires your attention. What kind of situation, Frank? He asked, the irritation evident in his voice. A child, sir. A girl of approximately 6 years old. She's at the main entrance. Insists she needs to speak with you. Says she's your daughter. The office suddenly seemed too small. Michael loosened his tie, feeling the air becoming scarce. Must be some kind of scam. Send her away. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sir, she has eyes exactly like yours. And she's with a photo of you with a woman. She said her mother passed away 2 months ago. Michael's heart skipped a beat. A distant memory crossed his mind, Diana mentioning something about family on their last night together before he diverted the subject to the company's new acquisition. Keep her there. I'm coming back. In 15 minutes, which seemed like an eternity, the Mercedes was parking in the circular driveway of the mansion. Frank, the security guard, waited with an embarrassed expression. She's in the living room, sir. The housekeeper offered her something to eat. Michael crossed the entrance hall with uncertain steps. In the large living room decorated with expensive and impersonal modern art pieces, a small figure sat on the edge of the Italian leather sofa. Curly brown hair framed an oval face with fair skin. She wore a simple but clean dress and held a worn backpack on her lap. When the girl raised her gaze, Michael froze. They were his eyes reflected in a child's face, the same unusual shade of green he had inherited from his grandmother. "Hello?" she said, her voice too firm for someone so small. "My name is Sophia Alves Harrison. My mother was Diana Alves. She died of cancer 2 months ago. Michael Harrison's world, built with such care and precision, collapsed under the weight of these simple words. Act 2. Development of the conflict. The housekeeper discreetly withdrew, leaving Michael and Sophia alone in the immense living room. Silence weighed between them, broken only by the ticking of the pendulum clock. "How did you find me?" was the first question he managed to formulate. Sophia opened her backpack and removed a plastic folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, a birth certificate, and a sealed letter. "Mom left this for me. She told me about you when she got very sick. She said she never told you about me because she didn't want to disrupt your life." The girl spoke with disconcerting maturity. "When she knew she was going to die, she gave me instructions. I stayed with Aunt Mariana, but she's not in a position to raise me, so I followed Mom's plan." Michael examined the documents with trembling hands. The birth certificate confirmed Sophia Alves Harrison, born in November 2017 in Chicago, Illinois. Mother, Diana Alves. Father, Michael Harrison. "You're 6 years old," he murmured, more to himself than to her. 6 years and 7 months, Sophia corrected. "Mom said I'm old for my age." The letter was addressed to him, written in the elegant handwriting he still recognized. "Michael, asterisk. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here and Sophia has found you. I know this is a shock, and perhaps even a betrayal in your view. When I discovered I was pregnant, you had just closed the biggest contract of your career. Remember? You said that was just the beginning, that nothing could divert you from the path you had charted. Asterisk, I didn't tell you about the pregnancy because I respected your choice. You chose your empire. I chose our daughter. Now I have no more choices to make, but you do. Sophia is extraordinary. She has your eyes, your intelligence, and, unfortunately, your stubbornness. I'm not asking for anything, just introducing you to the only thing I built that really matters." Asterisk Diana. Asterisk Michael raised his eyes from the letter to meet Sophia's attentive gaze. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging. She just waited, like someone who had learned too early that life is made up of waiting. "Where is your Aunt Mariana now?" he asked, trying to gain time to order his thoughts. "In Chicago. She's a teacher too, like Mom, but she has 3 children and the apartment is small." Sophia hesitated for the first time. "I sold my book collection to buy the bus ticket, a 6-year-old child traveling across the country alone." Michael felt a mixture of horror and admiration. "How did you manage to travel alone?" A small, proud smile appeared on the girl's face. "Mom said I look older when I speak. I told the driver that my mother was waiting for me in Boston. I showed him your address and said that my father is Michael Harrison, the man who builds buildings so tall they touch the clouds." The naive description of his work hit Michael like a punch. Was that how Diana described him to their daughter? As someone who built things that touched the sky? The phone rang, breaking the moment. Caroline, reminding him of the interview for Forbes. "Cancel everything for the rest of the day," he instructed. "Family matters." He hung up and found Sophia observing the room with contained curiosity. "Your house is beautiful," she commented, "but it doesn't have many colors." Michael looked around, noticing for the first time the chromatic paleness of his mansion. Shades of grey, white and black predominated, with occasional touches of metallic blue. The house that had cost a fortune suddenly seemed sterile. "You must be hungry," he said, suddenly aware of his most basic responsibilities. "A little. I ate a sandwich on the bus last night." Michael called the housekeeper and asked for something to be prepared. While Sophia ate in the kitchen, he retreated to his office and made the call he never imagined making. "Andrew, I need your services. Yes, it's urgent. DNA test. Today." Andrew Porter, his personal lawyer for more than a decade, asked the necessary questions with professional discretion. In 2 hours, a doctor arrived at the mansion to collect the samples. Sophia cooperated without questioning, like someone who had already gone through too many trials to care about a cotton swab in her cheek. While they waited for the results, which would take 2 days, Michael faced the challenge of accommodating a child in a house that had never been designed for one. The guest room was quickly adapted with the help of the housekeeper, who seemed delighted with the prospect of having a child in the house. "What do you like to do?" he asked, sitting uncomfortably on the edge of the bed while Sophia organized the little she had brought in her backpack. Some clothes, 2 worn books, and a small rag doll. "Reading, drawing, bird watching." She placed the doll carefully on the pillow. "Mom and I had a game. We would look at tall buildings and imagine what the people who lived or worked there were like." Michael swallowed hard. How many times had Diana and Sophia looked at one of his buildings, imagining the lives it sheltered, while he himself had never stopped to contemplate his own creation? Dinner was a surreal experience. Michael, accustomed to solitary meals or business dinners, found himself in front of a child who insisted on putting vegetables aside on her plate. "You don't like broccoli either?" Sophia asked, noticing that he had left his untouched. "Actually, I've never tried it," he admitted, realizing the absurdity of the situation. A 42-year-old man who asked the chef not to include certain foods in his diet without ever having tried them. Under Sophia's challenging gaze, he put a piece in his mouth. "It's not so bad," he concluded, surprised. "Mom said we need to try things before deciding if we like them or not." Sophia pushed her own broccoli into her mouth with determination. Even the difficult things. That night, lying in his king-size bed, Michael couldn't sleep. His grandmother Maria's words echoed in his mind. "The past always collects its debt, no matter how much money you have." In the next room, a child who carried his blood slept under his roof. A child he didn't know, fruit of a relationship he had sacrificed on the altar of ambition. A daughter. The next day brought new challenges. What to do with Sophia while he worked? She needed to go to school, but classes in Boston had already ended for the summer. She needed clothes, toys, a life. Caroline, his assistant, demonstrated impressive efficiency when informed of the situation. "I can reorganize your schedule to work more from home in the coming weeks," she suggested, without showing the shock she certainly felt. "And I know an excellent educational consultant who can help with the school transfer for the fall, assuming that—" She hesitated. "Assuming she stays," Michael completed. The question that hovered over everything: what would he do when the test confirmed paternity? Because looking at those green eyes identical to his, he already knew the answer. While Michael dealt with urgent phone calls and emails in his office, Sophia explored the mansion with contained curiosity. He found her in the library, sitting on the floor among dusty piles of books. "Have you read all of these?" she asked, impressed with the quantity. Michael looked at the shelves that went from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes he had acquired in bulk from an antique dealer to give personality to the environment, as his decorator had suggested. "Actually, no," he admitted. "These are more for decoration." Sophia frowned, clearly confused by the concept. "Books aren't for decoration. They're for reading." At the end of that afternoon, Michael received an unexpected call. Vanessa, his ex-wife, had seen Sophia when she passed by the mansion to pick up some forgotten belongings. "So it's true?" Vanessa's voice oscillated between disbelief and something that sounded strangely like hurt. "You have a daughter? For how long during our marriage did you know about this and hide it?" "I didn't know," he replied, exhausted. "I found out yesterday, just like you." The silence on the other end was heavy with meaning. "Well, that explains a lot," Vanessa finally said. "I always knew there was something about your time in Chicago, something you never completely got over." After hanging up, Michael found Sophia in the TV room, watching a documentary about the ocean. "Who was the pretty lady?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the screen where a school of colorful fish swam in perfect synchrony. "My ex-wife. We separated a few months ago." Sophia absorbed the information in silence, then asked, "Did you get divorced because you still loved my mother?" The question, so direct and innocent, hit Michael like lightning. Vanessa and he had separated after years of mutual distancing, arguments about children that he always postponed, commitments missed in the name of the company. "No, Sophia, we separated because I loved my work more than any person." The raw truth, spoken aloud for the first time, echoed in the room. Sophia turned her eyes back to the television, where the narrator explained how certain types of fish stay together for their entire lives. On the second day of their improvised coexistence, the housekeeper suggested a trip to the park. Michael, who hadn't set foot in Boston Common except to cut through on his way to some appointment, found himself sitting on a bench watching Sophia feed the ducks. That's when he spotted Jonathan Parker walking in his direction. Parker, his main competitor in the real estate market, seemed as surprised as he was by the encounter. "Harrison, that's a sight I didn't expect to see. Problems with the Park Authority trying to prevent some construction of yours?" The sarcasm was typical of their tense relationship. Michael was about to respond when Sophia approached, holding leaves she had collected. "Look, this one is star-shaped," she said, showing Michael a maple leaf. Parker observed the scene with poorly disguised astonishment. "My daughter, Sophia," Michael introduced. "Sophia, This is Mr. Parker. He also builds buildings. Parker's expression was worth more than any contract won. I didn't know you had a daughter, Harrison. There are many things you don't know about me, Parker. Upon returning home, Michael received the call he had been waiting for. Andrew, his lawyer. The results are in, Michael. Do you want me to come over? Just tell me. Compatibility of 99.9%. There's no doubt you're the father. Michael thanked him and hung up. Sophia was in the library again, this time reading aloud to the housekeeper, who was knitting while listening. He stopped at the door, observing the scene. For a brief moment, he imagined Diana there, sitting next to her daughter, perhaps laughing at some passage in the book. Diana, who had loved literature as much as he loved construction. Diana, who had built something much more valuable than any skyscraper. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Michael returned to his office and faced a decision he never imagined having to make. The custody of a child. His daughter. What did he know about raising someone? About being a father? His own childhood had been marked by paternal absence. A man always too busy with business to attend school games or help with homework. Was he doomed to repeat the same pattern? The phone rang again. It was Caroline. Mr. Harrison, sorry to bother you so late, but Mr. Blake called 3 times today. The Chicago project is having licensing problems and they need your presence there next week for a meeting with the city council. Chicago, the city where he had met Diana, where Sophia was born. Arrange everything, Caroline, but book 2 seats on the plane. I'll be traveling with my daughter. Act 3. Crisis and confrontation. The private plane of Harrison Enterprises cut through the skies toward Chicago. Sophia, who had never flown before, alternated between fascination with the clouds and nervousness about the occasional turbulence. "Why are we going to Chicago?" she asked as they colored together in an activity book that Caroline had provided for the trip. Michael hesitated. How to explain that? Besides the business meeting, he had a personal motive. He wanted to see where Diana had lived her last years, to meet Mariana, the sister who had cared for Sophia after her mother's death. "I have an important meeting, and I thought you might like to visit your Aunt Mariana and get more of your things." Sophia nodded, concentrating on keeping the pencil within the lines during some turbulence. "Aunt Marie will be surprised. She didn't believe I would actually go to Boston to find you. She said I was too brave for a 6-year-old child." The pride in the childish voice made Michael feel a twinge of guilt. What kind of situation had forced his daughter to develop such autonomy and courage? The hotel where they stayed was the same one where he had stayed 7 years earlier, during the construction of Harrison Tower. The presidential suite with 2 bedrooms seemed to please Sophia, who ran to the window to observe the view of Lake Michigan. "Mom and I used to come to the park near the lake on weekends," she said. "She said that water reminds us that we can always start over because lakes are never exactly the same 2 days in a row." Diana's wisdom, transmitted through her daughter, pierced Michael like an arrow. How many other lessons did Sophia carry? How many other memories of Diana lived through her? The meeting with the city council was scheduled for the next morning. Michael hired a babysitter recommended by the hotel to stay with Sophia while he was busy. "I don't need a babysitter," she protested. "I know how to take care of myself." "I'm sure you do," he replied, tucking the blanket over her in the hotel bed. "But I would feel better knowing there's an adult here with you." Sophia rolled her eyes in a gesture so familiar that Michael almost laughed. It was exactly how Diana used to do when he said something she considered excessively formal or rigid. The morning began with an urgent call. The babysitter had cancelled, something about a family emergency. Michael looked at Sophia, who was eating her breakfast while leafing through one of the books she had brought. "Looks like you'll have to come with me," he announced, checking his watch. There was no time to find another babysitter. Sophia's face lit up. "Will I see you build buildings that touch the clouds?" "Something like that," he replied, moved by the childish perception of his work. The city council meeting room was full when they arrived. Surprised looks followed Michael as he entered accompanied by a child. Sophia's presence, however, brought an unexpected element to the tense negotiation about licenses. "If I may make an observation," said the council president, after Michael presented his arguments about the importance of the project for the local economy, "your commitment to this city seems to have evolved since our last meeting, Mr. Harrison." Michael realized that the man was looking at Sophia, who had sat down well-behaved in a chair in the corner of the room, drawing in her notebook. Yes, counselor. Let's say my perspective on various matters has changed recently. The agreement was closed with terms that, surprisingly, seemed more reasonable than Michael had expected. As they left the building, Sophia held his hand, for the first time since she had come into his life. "You did well in there," she said. "Mom said you were very good at convincing people." Michael felt a lump in his throat. Did Diana talk about me a lot? Sophia observed the busy avenue before answering. "Not much, just good things. She had a photo of you in the drawer of her bedside table. Sometimes, when she thought I was sleeping, she would look at the photo and cry a little bit." The childish frankness hit Michael harder than any articulated accusation could. Diana had cried for him while he continued building his empire, celebrating each new contract, each new material conquest. After a quick lunch, they headed to Mariana Alves's address. The apartment was in a modest building in a middle-class neighborhood. As he rang the doorbell, Michael felt Sophia's hand squeeze his more tightly. The woman who opened the door had the same dark eyes as Diana, but her face showed a hardness that her sister had never had. Upon seeing Sophia, her countenance softened momentarily. "Sophia! Thank God!" She hugged the girl tightly, then raised her eyes to Michael, and the hardness returned instantly. "And you must be Harrison." The tone left no doubt. His name was known, and not in a positive way. "I'm Michael Harrison, yes. Can we come in? I think we have a lot to talk about." The apartment was small but cozy. Family photographs decorated the walls, and Michael recognized Diana in several of them. In some, Sophia appeared as a baby, then as a small child, always beside her mother. "My room is at the end of the hallway," Sophia advised, running to get more of her belongings, leaving the adults alone in the living room. "So you finally showed up," said Mariana, without offering anything to drink or sit. "After almost 7 years?" "I didn't know," Michael replied, sustaining the accusatory look. "Diana never told me about the pregnancy." A bitter laugh escaped from Mariana's lips. "And that relieves your conscience?" Diana knew very well what kind of man you were, the type who wouldn't trade his precious skyscrapers for a family. "That's not fair. She should have given me the chance to decide." Mariana crossed her arms. "She did. Every time you cancelled a date because of a meeting, every time you talked about the future, always in terms of contracts and acquisitions, never in terms of shared life." Her voice trembled slightly. "On the day she discovered the pregnancy, you were on television, cutting the ribbon at the inauguration of one of your towers, declaring that you finally had everything you ever wanted." The memory hit Michael with cruel clarity. The Harrison Tower, his first major solo project, the day he finally surpassed his father in the business world, the day Diana disappeared from his life. "I would have done differently if I had known," he murmured, without conviction. "Would you really?" Mariana challenged. "Diana died believing she made the right choice by not telling you, by not forcing you into a fatherhood you never wanted. She protected Sophia from an absent father, or worse, a resentful one." Sophia returned to the room carrying another backpack, larger than the previous one, interrupting the tense conversation. Mariana immediately softened her expression. "Found everything you wanted, dear?" The girl nodded, then turned to Michael. "Can we visit Mom's apartment before we leave? I want to show you where we lived." Michael looked at Mariana, who sighed. "The rent is paid until the end of the month. We haven't had the courage to empty everything yet." She handed a key to Sophia. "You know the way, right? It's just 2 floors down." Diana had lived in the same building as her sister, so close during all these years, while Michael built his empire thousands of miles away. Diana's apartment was smaller than Mariana's, but every inch reflected her personality. Shelves full of books, plants on the windowsills, photographs of Sophia at different ages. "This was my room," said Sophia, leading him down a narrow hallway. The child's room had walls painted light blue, with clouds drawn on the ceiling, a small bed with a colorful quilt, more books, drawings pinned to the walls. "Mom painted the sky for me because I was afraid to sleep in the dark," Sophia explained. "She said that, as long as there are stars, we're never really alone." Michael felt tears forming. He swallowed with difficulty while Sophia showed her treasures. Shells collected from a trip to the beach, a mobile of paper birds, a collection of colorful stones. "And this is Mom's room," she continued, opening another door. Diana's room was simple and elegant, like herself. A double bed with floral sheets, a desk with organized papers, a bookshelf with more books. On the bedside table, as Sophia had mentioned, there was a frame facing down. Michael approached and, with trembling hands, turned the frame over. It was a photograph of the two of them, taken during a boat ride on Lake Michigan. He couldn't even remember that day anymore. But there it was, captured forever. A moment when he seemed genuinely happy, laughing beside her, the wind messing up their hair, the city skyline in the background. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the photograph. He had forgotten how Diana could make him laugh, how she challenged his pragmatism with her free spirit, how she made him see beauty in simple things, how she made him want to be better. This was her favorite book, said Sophia, reaching for a worn volume on the shelf. 100 Years of Solitude. She read a little piece every night before sleeping. She said that stories are like small universes we can visit when our own world becomes too difficult. Michael touched the cover of the book. Diana had given him a copy once, insisting that he needed to expand his horizon. He had never read it, claiming lack of time. "There's always a lack of time until there's none left," he murmured, repeating the words Diana had said to him on that occasion. "That's another thing Mom used to say," exclaimed Sophia, surprised. "You remember her?" "More than I imagined," admitted Michael. As they explored the apartment, Sophia took a framed portrait from the wall, showing her at about 4 years old, smiling next to Diana in a park. "Can this come to your house, so you can know what Mom was like?" The question, so simple and at the same time so profound, caught Michael off guard. "Your house? Not our house." Sophia still didn't see him as a permanent part of her life. "Of course," he replied, noticing something handwritten on the back of the frame when Sophia turned it. It was Diana's handwriting. "For Sophia, remember that even the greatest distances can be crossed when there is love. Never stop believing in new beginnings." When they returned to Mariana's apartment, Diana's sister was waiting with a serious expression. "Sophia, can you go see your cousins in their room? I need to talk to Mr. Harrison." When the girl left, Mariana crossed her arms. "What are your intentions, Harrison? Take Sophia to Boston, put her in an elite school, and continue with your life as if she were just another item on your agenda." The hostility was palpable, but Michael couldn't blame her. From Mariana's point of view, he was just the man who had abandoned her sister. "I intend to be a father to her," he replied, sustaining her gaze. "I don't know exactly how yet, but I'm willing to learn." Mariana laughed without humor. "Learn? Parenthood isn't like acquiring a new professional skill, Harrison. There are no intensive courses or certifications. It's about being present every day, about sacrifices, about putting someone else's needs above your own. You think I'm not capable of that? I think you have no idea what Diana faced." Mariana took a thick folder from a drawer and threw it on the table. The medical reports. The cancer was advanced when they discovered it. She refused some more aggressive treatments at the beginning because she couldn't take care of Sophia during recovery. There was no one who could stay with the girl full time. Michael opened the folder, leafing through reports and exams, diagnoses, prognoses, medical recommendations, hospital bills with astronomical values. Why didn't she reach out to me? I could have helped financially at least. Pride? Fear? Protection for Sophia? Mariana sighed. Diana was complex and stubborn. In the last months, when she knew there was no more treatment possible, she organized everything. She said that if she couldn't be with Sophia, she wanted her to at least have the chance to know her father. Michael closed the folder, feeling the weight of Diana's choices and his own. "I'll do my best for Sophia. You have my word." Mariana studied him for a long time before responding. "Words are easy, Harrison. Diana believed yours once. I need to see actions." When they returned to the hotel that night, Sophia was quiet. She sat on the bed, hugging the rag doll she had brought from Boston. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, sitting beside her. "About Mom. About you. About how it's going to be from now on. And how do you think it's going to be?" Sophia shrugged in a strangely adult gesture. "I don't know. Will you want to take me to Boston?" "I'd like that, but I want to know what you want." The girl raised her eyes, surprised by the question. "Aunt Mary said you're very busy, that maybe you don't have time for a child." The observation hit Michael like a knife. It was exactly what Diana must have thought years ago. "I can learn to make time," he replied. "In fact, I think I'm already learning." That night, after Sophia fell asleep, Michael did something he never imagined. He picked up the phone and called his father in Florida. "Michael, did something happen?" The elderly man's voice showed surprise at his son calling so late. "Dad, how did you know you were ready to be a father?" The question came directly, without introductions or explanations. A long silence followed, then a hoarse laugh. "I never knew, son. Nobody knows. You just do the best you can. And if your best isn't good enough?" Another silence. "Does this have to do with the fact that you never wanted children with Vanessa?" Michael swallowed hard. How did his father know about that? Maybe. "Michael, your best will be good enough if you really care. That was my mistake with you. I cared more about the company, about success, about proving my worth." The old Harrison's voice faltered. "I only realized too late that the true worth was in watching my son grow up." The conversation continued late into the night, Michael revealing about Sophia, about Diana, about his fears. For the first time in decades, he spoke with his father not as one businessman to another, but as a son seeking guidance. The next morning, during breakfast at the hotel, Sophia asked, "What now?" "Now we go back to Boston. But first, I want to show you something." They drove to the city center, stopping in front of an imposing glass and steel skyscraper. "Harrison Tower," Michael announced, observing Sophia's reaction. The girl looked up, trying to see the top of the building that was lost among the clouds. "You built this?" "Yes, it was my first big project on my own." Michael pointed to the horizon. "And that one over there, the one with the curved facade, and the set of 3 towers to the north, all Harrison Enterprises projects." Sophia observed the city with new eyes. "So you really do build buildings that touch the clouds?" "Yes." Michael hesitated, then added, "But I recently discovered that there are more important things to build." "Like what?" "Like relationships, families, a future worth having." Sophia considered the words, then pointed to Harrison Tower. "Can we go up there?" An hour later, they were on the top floor, in the penthouse that housed the Harrison Enterprises office in Chicago. Sophia ran to the panoramic windows, marveled at the view. "I can see the lake! And the park where Mom used to take me." Michael observed his daughter, so small against the vast horizon of the city. He thought of Diana, who had never seen this view, despite having lived so many years in the shadow of these same buildings that he considered his greatest achievements. His phone rang. It was Blake, his project manager, with a crisis at a construction site in Boston. "Resolve it without me," Michael instructed. "I'll be back in 2 days, but for now, prioritize safety over the schedule." As he hung up, he noticed Sophia watching him with a curious expression. "Problems at work?" she asked. "Nothing that can't wait." The flight back to Boston was calmer. Sophia fell asleep against Michael's shoulder, exhausted from the emotions of the past few days. He observed her face at rest, so similar to Diana's. At the mansion in Beacon Hill, Michael realized that changes would be necessary. The house, designed to impress, was not a home for a child. In the days that followed, decisions were made. One of the guest rooms was completely redecorated, following Sophia's suggestion. Light blue on the walls, clouds on the ceiling, just like in the Chicago apartment. Caroline reorganized Michael's schedule, opening spaces that would have been unthinkable before. Meetings transferred to video conferences, condensed trips, delegation of responsibilities that he previously insisted on keeping under control. On a July afternoon, while Sophia was organizing her books on the new bookshelf, the doorbell rang. At the door, a middle-aged woman with a severe expression. "Mr. Harrison? I'm Rebecca Torres, social worker assigned to the case of Sophia Alves Harrison." Michael's stomach sank. Mariana had mentioned that the authorities would be notified, that there would be an investigation into Michael's suitability as a guardian. Miss Torres examined the mansion with critical eyes, asked detailed questions about the routine that Michael planned to establish, about schools, medical assistance, extracurricular activities, questions that he wasn't fully prepared to answer. "Mr. Harrison, I'll be frank," she said after the tense interview. "A single man with no experience with children, with a professional history that suggests extreme prioritization of work. You're not the ideal candidate for the custody of a 6-year-old child." Michael felt his blood freeze in his veins. "She is my daughter. Biologically, yes. But the question is, can you be the father she needs?" The question hung in the air like a sentence. "Aunt Rebecca!" Sophia's voice interrupted the tense moment. The girl ran to hug the social worker, who immediately softened her expression. "Sophia, you know me?" asked Miss Torres, surprised. "Of course, you were Mom's friend. There are photos of you at home. I mean, in the apartment in Chicago." Michael observed the interaction, realizing that there was much more about Diana and Sophia's life that he didn't know. Rebecca Torres wasn't just a random social worker. She was someone who had known Diana, who perhaps had witnessed his ex-girlfriend's struggle to raise Sophia alone. "Mr. Michael, can I show Aunt Rebecca my new room?" Sophia asked, pulling the woman's hand. As Sophia led Miss Torres down the hallway, Michael remained in the living room, feeling judged not only by the system but by Diana's ghost and by all who knew her, who witnessed her strength and dedication. Later, after the social worker's departure, Michael faced a decisive moment. Jonathan Parker, his competitor, had called with an unexpected proposal, a merger between their companies, creating the largest real estate conglomerate on the East Coast. The deal would require Michael to move to New York for at least a year during the transition. "It's the chance we've been waiting for years," argued Andrew, his lawyer, on the phone. "Parker is giving in more than we imagined. The market value of Harrison Enterprises would double overnight." Michael looked out the office window, seeing Sophia in the garden, trying to teach tricks to the dog they had adopted the previous week. Another unthinkable change in his previous life. And what about the period in New York? Is it non-negotiable? Absolutely. Parker wants you there, personally supervising the integration. It's a demonstration of commitment to the new company. A year in New York. At another time, Michael wouldn't have hesitated. Now, it meant uprooting Sophia from Boston just as she was beginning to establish herself, taking her away from the school where she was already enrolled for the fall, perhaps compromising his chances of obtaining permanent custody. "I need to think, Andrew. Don't take long. Parker wants an answer by Friday." As he hung up, Michael realized he had company. Sophia was standing at the office door holding a drawing. "It's for you," she said, extending the paper. It was a childish drawing, but surprisingly detailed. A man in a suit and a girl holding hands in front of what appeared to be the mansion. Above them, written in colorful letters, "My new family." "Do you like it?" she asked, anxious for approval. Michael felt his chest tighten. "It's perfect, Sophia." That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Michael sat in the living room with Parker's proposal in his hands and Sophia's drawing beside it. Two visions of the future that seemed incompatible. The phone rang. It was Mariana. "How is she?" she asked without preamble. "Adapting. She's an incredible child." "Yes, she is." Mariana hesitated. "Rebecca called me. She said she was surprised by your changes." "What changes?" "Your lifestyle. Your priorities." She expected to find the same workaholic that Diana described, but she saw a man trying to be a father. Michael didn't know what to respond. "Look, Harrison, I'm not going to pretend you were my choice to raise Sophia, but Diana believed you could change, that there was goodness in you under all that ambition." Maybe she was right. Mariana's words weighed on Michael's conscience as he contemplated Parker's proposal, the professional opportunity of a lifetime against the opportunity to be the father Sophia deserved. The next morning, Michael made his decision. He called an emergency meeting with his executive team and announced, "From today, I'll be assuming a different role in the company. Caroline will be promoted to COO and will handle daily operations. James will oversee new projects and development. I'll continue as CEO, but with a more strategic and less hands-on involvement." The shock was general. Michael Harrison, the man who personally checked every detail of every project, delegating power? "As for the Parker proposal," he continued, "we'll make a counter-proposal. I'm willing to accept the merger, but I won't move to New York. I can travel weekly if necessary, but my permanent residence will be Boston." Andrew, his lawyer, seemed the most shocked. "Michael, this could compromise the deal. Parker insisted on the New York clause. Then he'll have to reconsider or seek another partner. I have more important priorities now." After the meeting, Michael called Parker personally. "Harrison, your lawyer presented me with your conditions." Parker's voice sounded cautious. "Should I assume this has to do with the little girl I saw with you in the park?" "My daughter, yes. I'm not going to leave her now that she's finally found me." A long silence followed. "You know, Harrison, I always thought you were just another soulless corporate shark." Parker's voice softened slightly. "Maybe I was wrong. We can review the residence clause. In the end, what matters is the value you add to the business, not your address." The relief Michael felt had nothing to do with the saved deal, but with not having to choose between his professional world and Sophia. That afternoon, while reviewing documents in his home office, Michael heard a commotion at the main entrance. Upon investigating, he found Vanessa, his ex-wife, animatedly conversing with Sophia in the hall. "Vanessa? What are you doing here?" he asked, surprised. His ex-wife smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't seen in years. "I came to properly meet your daughter. Sophia invited me to her piano recital next week." "Piano recital?" Michael looked confusedly at Sophia, who smiled timidly. "I was going to tell you today. I started lessons last week with Professor Wilson from the music school. The performance is for beginners." Vanessa observed the interaction with a thoughtful expression. "She has your eyes, Michael, and your stubborn chin." Then, turning to Sophia, "I'd love to attend your recital, dear." After Vanessa's departure, Michael confronted his own surprise. Sophia took initiatives, created her own network of relationships, followed her interests, demonstrating an independence he never had in childhood. "Sorry I didn't tell you about the piano lessons," Sophia said during dinner. "I wanted it to be a surprise." "It's okay, but in the future, I prefer to know about your commitment. It's my responsibility as a father." The word father still sounded strange on his lips, but less and less out of place. "Aunt Mari said you're going to lose a lot of money because of me, that you'll lose an important business." Michael stopped eating, surprised by the observation. "Mariana said that?" Sophia nodded, serious. "She was talking on the phone with someone. She said she was impressed that you chose to stay with me instead of going to New York." "I'm not losing anything, Sophia. I'm gaining something much more valuable." The girl considered the response for a moment. "Mom used to say that the best things in life can't be bought." Michael smiled, remembering Diana using exactly that phrase when he tried to impress her with an expensive gift at the beginning of their relationship. Your mother was a very wise woman. 2 weeks later, Michael received a call from Miss Torres, the social worker. "Mr. Harrison, I've completed my assessment. Taking into consideration the bond already formed, the adaptations made, and especially the well-being demonstrated by Sophia, I'm recommending the approval of your permanent custody." The words Michael had been waiting for finally came, bringing a wave of emotion he wasn't prepared to feel. "Thank you," was all he could say. "Don't thank me, Mr. Harrison." Miss Torres's voice became more personal. "Diana was my friend. I saw how much she struggled to raise Sophia alone. Part of me always wondered how it would have been if you had been present. Now, I'm seeing. She would be proud of your transformation." That night, after celebrating the news with a special dinner, Michael entered Sophia's room to say goodnight and found her looking at the photograph of Diana they had brought from Chicago. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "If Mom would be happy to see me here, with you." Michael looked at the portrait. Diana smiled, her eyes full of that life and intelligence that had attracted him from the first moment. "I think so. I think, deep down, that's why she left that letter. Those instructions for you to find me." Sophia reflected on the words, then asked the question Michael had feared for weeks. "Did you love her?" The question hung in the air, demanding absolute honesty. "Yes," he finally answered. "But I didn't know how to recognize it in time. I was too busy pursuing other things I thought were more important." Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of intimacy that still surprised him. "Now you know what's important?" Michael hugged her, feeling the weight and lightness of this small life that depended on him. "Now I know." Act 4. Resolution. Autumn in Boston transformed the city into a living painting. Golden and reddish leaves fell on the gardens of the mansion in Beacon Hill, now full of life and colors. Sophia had started classes at the prestigious Cambridge School, 15 minutes from the house, selected not for its exclusivity, as Michael would originally have preferred, but for the arts program that had enchanted his daughter. 3 months had passed since the final hearing with the judge who had granted Michael permanent custody. The room that previously functioned as his home office had been converted into a shared space where Michael occasionally worked while Sophia drew or practiced piano on the small instrument installed by the window. The merger with Parker Development was progressing, albeit at a slower pace than initially planned. The weekly trips to New York had become part of the routine, but with one non-negotiable rule. Michael always returned in time to have dinner with Sophia on Fridays and spent entire weekends with her, something unthinkable in his previous life. That October afternoon, Michael was watching Sophia's school presentation in the front row, a children's adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, with his daughter playing Dorothy. Beside him, surprisingly, were his father and stepmother, who had flown from Florida especially for the occasion, and Mariana, who had come from Chicago for a week-long visit. "She has talent," his father whispered with genuine pride when Sophia sang her solo. "She takes after her mother," Michael replied, feeling the familiar pang of longing for Diana. Mariana, on the other side, briefly squeezed his arm, a gesture of recognition that meant more than words could express. The relationship between them had evolved from hostility to carefully built mutual respect. Michael had ensured that Sophia maintained regular contact with her aunt and cousins, with scheduled visits and weekly video calls. After the presentation, a small celebration was organized in the mansion's garden. Caroline, now officially COO of Harrison Parker Enterprises, toasted to the success of the play, while Sophia, still dressed as Dorothy, charmed everyone with her energy. In a moment of pause, Michael found his father contemplating the Boston skyline from the terrace. "She changed you," observed the elder Harrison, without beating around the bush. "For the better, I hope," Michael replied. A rare smile appeared on the wrinkled face. "Without a doubt. I see in you the father I should have been. The father I couldn't be because I was too busy building something to leave for you without realizing that you needed my presence more than my legacy." The words, coming from a man traditionally closed with his emotions, hit Michael deeply. "It's never too late to start over, Dad." He indicated Sophia, who was now showing something on her tablet to Michael's stepmother. "She taught me that." Later, after the guest's departure, Michael found Sophia in her room, looking out the window at the city lights that were beginning to turn on. "Did you like your party?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It was perfect." She hesitated, then added, "Only Mom was missing." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of that absence that would never be completely filled. "You know, sometimes I feel like she's watching, especially when you smile the same way she used to smile." Sophia considered the idea for a moment. "Teacher Wilson asked about my family for a school project. I need to bring photos of my family on Monday. We can look for some good photographs. I've already set some aside." Sophia opened a drawer and took out a small box. "There are some of you, some of Mom, and this one." She showed a recent photograph taken during a picnic at the Common. Michael and Sophia sitting on a checkered blanket, laughing at something they no longer remembered. The spontaneity of the image perfectly captured the new reality they were building together. "Can I take this one too?" "Of course. It's a great photo of us." Sophia placed the photograph in a school folder, then looked at Michael with sudden seriousness. "Dad, can I ask you something?" The word "Dad" still caused a wave of emotion in Michael. Sophia used it with increasing frequency, each occurrence like an unexpected gift. "Anything. If you could go back in time, would you have stayed with Mom? Would we have been a family from the beginning?" The question, so direct and profound, demanded an equally honest answer. "Sophia, the man I was back then didn't deserve your mother. Or you." Michael chose his words carefully. "I needed to lose Diana and almost lose the chance to meet you, to understand what really matters. I prefer not to think about what could have been, but to value what we have now and what we can build from here on." Sophia processed the response, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "Mom used to say that we shouldn't look back too much because we're not going in that direction." She was right, as always. Michael smiled. "Now, how about we watch that movie you wanted to see?" As they settled in the living room, Michael received a text message from Parker. "Tokyo proposal received. Extraordinary meeting Monday. Potential for greatest international expansion yet." Years ago, such a message would have sent Michael immediately to the office, cancelling any personal plans. Now, he simply put the phone in his pocket. The meeting would wait until Monday, during business hours. Friday night belonged to Sophia. The movie began, an animation about a girl who discovered a magical world inside an old wardrobe. Sophia nestled beside Michael on the sofa, occasionally commenting on the scenes. Half the popcorn had already disappeared when Michael's phone vibrated again. It was a notification from the weather app, storm forecast for the weekend. Sophia, who had developed a fear of thunderstorms after her mother's death, didn't notice the message, absorbed in the movie. Michael slid his finger across the screen, checking the predicted intensity of the storm. Moderate to strong. He made a mental note to check if they had enough flashlights and candles, in case the power failed. The year before, such a concern would never have crossed his mind. His domestic staff would take care of it. Now he felt personally responsible for Sophia's safety and well-being. The storm arrived in the early hours of Saturday, as predicted. Michael woke to the sound of distant thunder and, instinctively, got up to check on Sophia. He found her already awake, sitting on the bed with her knees against her chest, eyes wide with each flash that illuminated the room. "Can I stay with you?" she asked in a low voice. Without hesitation, Michael nodded. Back in his room, he arranged the pillows, and Sophia quickly settled beside him. "Mom used to tell stories during storms," Sophia revealed. "She said that thunder was just the clouds playing bowling." Michael laughed softly. "I'm not good with stories like your mother, but I can try." A particularly loud thunder made Sophia jump. Michael instinctively hugged her tighter. "Or we can do something else. When I was little and afraid of storms, my grandmother Maria taught me a trick." He reached for the remote control and turned on the ambient sound in the room. "We close our eyes and focus on another sound, a sound that calms us." The soft piano melody filled the room, competing with the roars of the storm outside. Slowly, Sophia relaxed in his arms, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular. "It's working," she whispered, sleepily. Michael watched his daughter fall asleep, protected in his arms against the fears of the night. He thought of Diana, of how she would have faced nights like this alone with Sophia for years, of how, despite everything, she had raised a strong, intelligent, and compassionate daughter. "Thank you," he murmured in the darkness, not knowing exactly to whom he directed his gratitude. To Diana, for having given him this unexpected gift? To Sophia, for having found her way to his door? To life, for giving him a second chance? The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the sky washed and bright. Michael was preparing pancakes in the kitchen, a new skill acquired in recent months, when Sophia appeared, still in pajamas, hair disheveled from sleep. "Can we plant a garden?" she asked without preamble as she sat at the table. "A garden?" "Yes. Mom and I had pots in the window of the apartment, but never a real garden. We could plant flowers, strawberries, maybe a tree." The simplicity of the request touched Michael. His daughter, who could ask for expensive gifts or extravagant trips, just wanted a piece of land to cultivate. "Of course we can. We have plenty of space in the back. We can start planning today." Sophia's smile lit up the kitchen more than the morning sun. During the following weeks, the garden became their joint project. Michael, who had built skyscrapers, found himself learning about soil pH and differences between perennial and annual plants. Sophia absorbed knowledge voraciously, becoming the family expert in horticulture. On a November afternoon, while they were planting tulip bulbs that would bloom in the spring, Michael received a call he had been avoiding for weeks. It was the principal of his former school in Chicago, where Diana had worked. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for finally answering. We're organizing a memorial for Professor Alves, a reading garden at the school, dedicated to her. We would very much like you and Sophia to participate in the inauguration ceremony next month." The idea of returning to Chicago, of publicly facing the past he had ignored for so long, made Michael hesitate. But looking at Sophia, kneeling in the soil digging holes for the bulbs, he knew what his answer would be. "We would be honored to participate. Diana deserves to be remembered." On the day of the memorial, fine snow was falling over Chicago. The reading garden, a covered area with bookshelves, colorful poofs, and winter-resistant plants, was decorated with photographs of Diana. In one of them, she smiled surrounded by students during a literary fair. Sophia, formally dressed for the occasion, firmly held Michael's hand while the principal spoke about Diana's dedication to teaching and to the students. Former colleagues shared memories. Parents thanked for the difference she had made in their children's lives. When Michael was invited to say a few words, he initially froze. What could he say? That he had missed the chance to truly know this extraordinary woman? That only now did he understand what he had lost? "Diana Alves was exceptional," he began, his voice firmer than expected. "Not just as a teacher, but as a person. She saw potential where others saw limitations. She built bridges instead of walls." Michael paused, looking at Sophia. "And she left her greatest legacy in our daughter, who carries her kindness, intelligence, and determination." After the ceremony, as the guests dispersed, Sophia approached one of the larger photographs of Diana. "She looks happy here," observed the girl, touching the glass that protected the image. "She was doing what she loved," Michael replied. "Teaching, inspiring, building the future through her students." Sophia considered the words for a moment. "Like you build buildings." "Not exactly. The buildings I build eventually deteriorate or are demolished. What your mother built lasts forever, because it lives in the people she touched." On the way back to the hotel, Sophia was unusually quiet. "Something wrong?" Michael asked, concerned. I'm thinking about what I want to be when I grow up. And what do you want to be? Sophia looked out the car window, watching the Chicago skyscrapers shrink as they moved away from downtown. I want to build things that last, like Mom did, and like you do now. Like I do now? Michael was confused. Yes, you're building our family, and that will last forever, won't it? Michael felt his heart tighten with the profound simplicity of the childish observation. Yes, Sophia, that will last forever. Upon returning to Boston, the routine resumed with a new dimension. Diana's memorial had brought a closure that both needed. Michael hired a landscaper to finalize the garden project, including a small reading bench similar to the one inaugurated at the school in Chicago, a silent tribute to Diana in their own home. At the office, the merger with Parker was finally complete. The new company, larger and more influential than any of the previous ones, demanded less of Michael's physical presence than he had feared. The delegation of responsibilities, initially a necessity imposed by his new life as a father, had proven surprisingly effective. On a Friday afternoon, Michael was in his office in the city when Caroline entered with a concerned expression. Sophia's school principal called. She fainted during physical education class. They've already taken her to Beth Israel Hospital. The world seemed to stop. Michael left the meeting room without explanations, ignoring the confused looks from the Japanese executives who had flown especially to discuss expansion in the Asian market. In the car, on the way to the hospital, all his professional achievements suddenly seemed insignificant. At the hospital, he found Sophia already being examined. The little one seemed pale, but smiled when she saw him. "It was nothing, Dad. I just got dizzy." The doctor, a middle-aged pediatrician, confirmed, "It seems to be just a drop in blood pressure due to physical exertion combined with inadequate nutrition." She admitted not having eaten lunch today. Michael looked at Sophia, confused. "Why didn't you eat?" The girl lowered her eyes. "I was nervous about the science presentation. I forgot." The relief was immense, but brought with it a realization. No matter how much he tried to control everything, to protect Sophia from any danger, he could never anticipate all the challenges she would face. Back at the mansion, after Sophia regained her color and energy, Michael found a message from Parker on the answering machine. "Harrison, the Japanese are furious. You left without explanation in the middle of the most important meeting of the quarter." Before, such a reprimand would have caused panic in Michael. Now, he simply smiled while preparing soup for Sophia. He would call Parker later and explain. The Japanese would understand, or not. The meeting could be rescheduled. Some things were non-negotiable. At Christmas, the mansion in Beacon Hill was completely transformed. Festive decorations, a huge pine tree in the main room, Christmas music echoing through the corridors, all Sophia's suggestion, who had planned the celebration with contagious enthusiasm. The Christmas dinner gathered an unlikely combination. Michael's father and stepmother, Mariana, and her children, who flew from Chicago, Vanessa and her new boyfriend, Caroline, and some key employees of the company who didn't have family in the city. Even Miss Torres, the social worker, had accepted the invitation after forming an unexpected bond with Michael during the follow-up visits. While the adults chatted in the living room after dinner, Michael found Sophia in the winter garden, watching the snow that was beginning to fall. "Is everything okay?" he asked, joining her. "Yes, just thinking about Mom. This would have been our first Christmas with you." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of that absence that would always accompany them. "You know what she told me once," Sophia continued, "that people never really go away as long as we continue to tell their stories, to remember them, to live by the values they taught us." Michael smiled, recognizing Diana's wisdom in his daughter's words. "Your mother was right, and as long as we're together, she'll always be part of us." Sophia looked at the night sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear between the clouds. "As long as there are stars, we're never really alone." She recited the words that Diana had painted in her room in Chicago. "I like to think that she's a star now, looking out for us." "The brightest in the sky," Michael agreed, hugging his daughter as they contemplated together the first snow of winter. On Christmas morning, among presents and laughter, Michael gave Sophia one last package, smaller than the others. "This one is special," he said. Sophia carefully opened it, revealing a delicate silver locket. Inside, 2 photographs, one of Diana, smiling with that vitality that characterized her, and another recent one of Michael with Sophia. "So that you always have both of us with you," he explained. no matter where you are." Sophia hugged him tightly, the locket secure in her hand. "Thank you, Dad. It's perfect." In the new year, as fireworks illuminated the Boston sky, Michael Harrison reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought him here. From the childhood lacking paternal affection to the obsession with material success, from the lost relationship with Diana to the unexpected reunion with the daughter he didn't know existed. Sophia, dressed in her favorite pajamas, was fighting against sleep to watch the countdown on television. Her face, so similar to Diana's, displayed that unique mixture of fragility and strength that had captivated him from the first moment she appeared at his door. The past always collects its debt, no matter how much money you have. The words of his Portuguese grandmother echoed in his mind. The debt had been collected, yes, in the form of lost years he would never recover. But he had also received an unexpected gift, the chance to redeem himself, to build something truly meaningful. Not a skyscraper that touched the clouds, but a relationship that reached something much deeper. Sophia finally fell asleep against his shoulder, the locket shining softly under the television light. Michael arranged a strand of brown hair that fell over his daughter's face, marveling at the simplicity and complexity of paternal love that now defined his existence. Outside, the first snow of January was beginning to fall, covering Boston with a white mantle. A new page, a new year, a new chapter in the story he had never imagined living. Michael Harrison, the man who had built an empire by sacrificing relationships, had finally discovered the only truly indestructible construction, one built not with steel and concrete, but with small moments of love, presence, and redemption. The end.